We live out of our rucksack, we fight off our rack, and we survive with what's in our pockets. Welcome back. So what we're going to do today is talk about pocket survival kits. Now, that quote you heard at the beginning of the video was from our ranger instructor, day 8 Florida phase, the Weaver. This guy was patrol leader. Just imagine neck-high swamp water after nearly 60 days of food deprivation, sleep deprivation, and being completely exhausted, falling asleep standing up, and you have some idea of how that went. Now, that's great advice from a ranger instructor. He also said have a knife, a way to start fire, and a snack in your pocket at all times. I have since taken that advice and adapted it into a pocket survival kit, or at least items we can put in our pockets to have with us for a survival scenario. So let's crack this open. We'll show you what we started out with. First thing is just a Mylar blanket, but we can use this to make an emergency shelter. Next is just a cravat, still in its wrapping. Next, 2 different ways to start fire. We have just a small lighter and then a ferro rod that has been used for a long time. And then the first knife typically used, just a simple folder. This is a Benchmade Griptilian. I've had it for years now. Cutting tool. We have that signal mirror, so signaling device. And then lastly, we have our quart bag for another container. And then we have 550 cord for construction. Now all these items can go in our pockets. We distribute them amongst our clothing, so we have items everywhere. But this was the original kit and it started out with for pocket survival. Right, so that was the old kit from training years gone past. We have since improved upon this kit. Now we already have those items distributed in our clothing and then on our person. So let's go ahead and affect survival, moving down the 7 priorities of survival. Now it's supposed to rain at some point today. So first things first, let's set up a shelter. Now real quick, for shelter, our first layer of protection against the elements is our clothing, which is why we should always have some sort of coat with us, or at least a coat or an outer garment that is going to retain body heat as well as repel water, or at least be water resistant. We can easily wear this out in the woods to keep ourselves warm and protect ourselves from the elements. But we can always have a survival blanket in our pocket to set up an emergency shelter. Another reason to have a coat is to put it on just in case the rain comes, to keep us dry while we're setting up our survival shelter. We've got our survival blanket and then paracord from our shoelaces to suspend our shelter. We want 4 inches or greater of compressed debris on the forest floor so we don't lose body heat through the ground and stay warm overnight. But we've got our shelter up, we've got our debris bed. Now we're ready for our next priority, fire. All right, we have our fire materials ready. We have tinder, small bark from that juniper over here, and then twigs or smalls for kindling, and then larger pieces for fuel. Fire needs oxygen, heat, and fuel in order to work. We're going to apply the heat using a ferro rod. So what do you do when your first form of fire doesn't work? The tinder seems to be a little bit too moist and is not taking the sparks from our ferro rod. So what do? That's why we always have a spare fire lighting source. And we have our lighter. Our lighter can be a primary method for fire lighting, instant flame and gratification like that, but having a ferro rod and knowing which tinders to use around this area are important as well, in case a ferro is all we have. But we have our lighter so we can light this fire because our ferro has failed. And that's why having 2 forms of fire lighting is incredibly important. In case that first one fails, you've got your backup. Now, We've done this in relatively short order for setting up a shelter, getting our debris bed, collecting our fire material, and you've seen some of the items as far as our pocket survival kit. Now that we have shelter and fire taken care of, our next priority is water. Now in this area we have two ways that we can get water with our pocket survival kit. Our first way is through water vines like this one. We can cut from the top with our Swiss Army knife and then the bottom with our Swiss Army knife, and we have water inside that vine that we can drink right away. Now, as you can probably guess, there is not a lot of water in these vines anymore this time of year. We're only getting a few drops out of this vine, which is why we have a backup way to get water. It's going to require us to scavenge just a little bit. Now, we were counting on the water vines to have a lot of water in them, and we were going to use those for our primary water source. But it's that time of year where the water vines are starting to lose a lot of their water, and all we're getting out of that is drops. It's not enough to sustain us in a survival situation. So we have a backup way to collect water and purify it in the form of water bag with water treatment tablets wrapped inside. Now, the only source of water available down here in the bottomlands is from swamp water, and it's some pretty nasty stuff. We're gonna have to filter that water before we put it in our bag and treat it to make it potable. We started that fire first because we can use the charcoal from this fire, and then we scavenged around the area, found some moss, and then somebody left a plastic bottle out here that we can use to turn this bottle with the charcoal and moss into a filter, strain the water we're gonna get from the swamp, put it in this bag, add our tablets to treat it, and then we have potable water. All right, so we've got shelter taken care of. We've proven we can start a fire. We tried two different methods for getting water, one of which worked. Let's talk food. Now, with our food bar as part of our pocket survival kit, remember, knife, way to start fire, and a snack in your pocket. We don't want to eat this bar right away. We want to wait till our water is done being treated, and then we can consume this. But we may want to wait until right before bed to eat this bar, finish drinking our water. The digestion process creates heat in the human body, and so eating right before bed and finishing our water will help keep us warm through the night, add it onto our shelter, our debris bed, and then a fire out front. Having a high-calorie energy bar like this one, especially with a lot of fats and carbohydrates in it, will be a lot easier for us to digest and help reduce the amount of water our stomachs are going to pull from our bodies as part of the digestion process. That way we can help avoid dehydration in a survival scenario. So always go with high-calorie energy bars that have a lot of fats and carbohydrates in them. All right, so we've got four, the main priorities of survival: shelter, fire, water, and food as part of our kit. Now for food, we could carve up a frog gig. You probably saw them down there, a bunch of frogs in the swamp hopping around. We can go down there at dusk and with a headlamp hunt for frogs and have another meal later on tonight to go with our energy bar. Let's talk about signaling. Now with signaling, one of the items we can put in our pocket that is going to be multifunctional, not only to signal but help us see at nighttime, possibly land navigate at night or just see around camp, or even go down to the swamp and hunt for frogs using a frog gig, is just a small headlamp like this Petzl E-Lite. It's got a bright light, even brighter white light. We've got a strobe function. We should always have a headlamp that's got a strobe function for that passive signal at nighttime for search and rescue. And one thing I like about this is that it comes with a whistle attached as part of the headband. As a signal like that, just signal through the trees, especially out here in the bottomlands, as an auditory signal to alert search and rescue to our presence and to guide them in to our location here at camp if they can't see us. With signaling, we have our headlamp, we have our whistle as signaling devices. Another thing we can carry on us that is multifunctional and that is a great signal is that handy dandy old faithful signaling mirror. With the signaling mirror, we can use the sun's rays to signal search and rescue. Signaling mirror is going to be part of our pocket survival kit. All right, and then lastly for signaling, we have our red bandana. We used it for our filter, our strainer, so we could get fresh water, which is just about done. But a bright colored bandana or piece of cotton cloth like this, we can use for a flag, hang it up in a tree as a marker. We can use it for a strainer like this, turn it into char cloth, use it as a container. It's got a variety of purposes, but a brightly colored one like this can be used as a signal as well. All right, it's been 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and give it a taste test. I'm kind of eager to see what this swamp water is going to taste like. Judging by the color, it's going to taste like my bandana. Actually, that's pretty good. It doesn't taste like much. Tastes just like bottled water almost. That means our filter worked just fine. Good to go. All right, so we've got two priorities of survival left. That's land navigation and then medical aid. So let's talk about land navigation very quickly. One of the things we can have in our pockets for a survival kit is just a small compass. Anything to give us a direction or a cardinal direction is going to be incredibly helpful out here, especially in the bottomlands when you're in an area that's got such a thick canopy that it's going to be hard to land navigate, and even terrain associate. If you'll notice out here, it's very difficult. Another thing we can do with our cravat is one of those 20 uses for an army cravat, or even our bandana. If we have just a plain colored cloth with us, like this cravat, we can take a fabric marker, draw out a map of the area that we're going into on this cloth, and then we have that map with us. And then it obviously goes without saying, make sure you memorize your map before you use it as part of your strainer, because that fabric marker will disappear with the water you put through the strainer. And then if all else fails and we don't have just a basic small compass like this Silva as part of our pocket survival kit, another thing we can do that I've gone to now is having a button compass on us. And what better way to have that than to store it inside of a cash belt? We can just have that basic button compass for rudimentary land navigation, get that cardinal direction along with our sear map, and then we can try to attempt to find our way out of the situation we're in and locate rescue. All right, and that brings us to our final priority of survival: medical aid. Medical aid should be at the top of the list for any survival situation. Make sure we assess ourselves and anyone that we're with that nobody is suffering from some sort of injury or wound. Now, we don't have that many items in our survival kit or in our pockets to treat a lot of different injuries, but we have our cravat or our bandana or cloth, even our clothing, to treat a wound using wilderness first aid techniques. We can take that piece of cloth, that bandana or that cravat, and make it into a tourniquet with a stick out here in the wilderness and stop arterial bleeding and potentially save a life. Humans will bleed out in 2 to 3 minutes from a catastrophic wound in which an artery was severed. We can apply the cravat as a pressure dressing or a simple dressing over a laceration. And then we can even use that cravat or that bandana to help splint a fracture, swath it together, or create a sling to treat a fracture and then immobilize that fracture to prevent further injury to the casualty. All right, so you've seen some of the items here and there used from our pocket survival kit to affect a lot of the priorities of survival. What you haven't seen is the spread of the kit just laid out. So let's go ahead and take a look at that kit laid out. That way you can adapt your pocket survival kit based off the items we use today. This is the pocket survival kit. Now, we don't have to have all of these items in our kit. This is a lot of stuff to be shoving in our pockets, but as mentioned before, per that ranger instructor, we want to have a knife, a way to start fire, and then a snack in our pocket to at least survive. Mylar blanket for shelter, water bag and tabs for water purification. We can filter that water first and then put it in the bag to treat. We have a flashlight, a very small E-Lite so we can see in the dark at nighttime. Cordage for construction and shelter, that snack again. A compass, a way to navigate, possibly a lighter and or a ferro rod for fire lighting, and then a survival signaling mirror to signal for rescue. And then we have our bandana underneath for the entire kit. All of this packs up into a nice quart-sized bag that we can have available in our kit, in our backpack, and then once we find ourselves in that survival situation, we take these items out, distribute them in our clothing, in our coat, on our person. So we have these items available. We can affect survival in a survival scenario. That's the whole point of having a kit, is to distribute these items so we have them on us. In the event we are separated from our gear again for whatever reason, we have these items on our person. But this is our entire kit for the pocket survival kit. All right, guys, pocket survival kit. The items we can put in our pockets to make shelter, purify water, get some food, and then potentially find our way out of a survival situation, signaling all the while. So I hope you guys like this video. If you did like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment in the comment section. I always appreciate your feedback. I want to thank you guys for everything you do for me, for the channel, for your likes, your views, your subscriptions, your comments, your feedback, and your shares. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks.